Go ahead, Cheryl.
We now need a motion to reconvene.
So moved.
Do I have a
Second.
Okay. Okay, due to the resignation of Mr. Trusty, we have a vacancy for board president right now. So at this time, just like the reorg meeting, I would like to open the floor for nominations of board president.
I'd like to nominate Donovan Rodriguez.
I nominate David Matthews.
Okay, William Feinstein. Are there any other nominations for board president? Okay, seeing that there are none, the first nomination by Suzanne Mullings was for Donovan Rodriguez. So I will now be doing the roll call for Donovan Rodriguez as board to become board president. Ms. Banks Watson,
Abstain.
Ms. Blumenthal,
Abstain.
Mr. Montano.
That's a yes for Donald.
Yes, was your answer? Dr. Mullings,
Yes.
Mr. Feinstein,
Abstain.
abstain. Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Matthews.
No.
Okay, the tally was 3 abstentions, 3 yeses, and 1 no vote. So that there's not 4 yes votes. We will now move on to the nomination made by William Feinstein for David Matthews as board president. Ms. Banks Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Blumenthal,
Yes.
Mr. Montano,
No.
Dr. Mullings,
No.
Mr. Feinstein,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
No.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
Okay, the tallies for Mr. Matthews is 4 yes votes and 3 no votes. Therefore, based on the 4 yes votes, Mr. Matthews, you are now board president.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to just say a couple of words and then we can get to business. One of my goals is to make these meetings more efficient, not only for the public, but also for the board members. People do, for the most part, work the next day. And I think if we can make these meetings more efficient, and of course that involves working with the superintendent and having votes and discussion. And it also involves making sure that you read the materials before the board meeting and try to reach out to the appropriate, to the superintendent, or if it's a finance matter, probably the business administrator beforehand, so that that will greatly reduce the amount of time that we have these meetings. You know, so I'll do everything I can for the public to make sure they have a voice. This is going to be a very inclusive tenure for me. I want to make sure that we hear the public and respect them and also respect one another. So with that being said, thank you for your confidence in me, and I'll work hard. I have quite a bit of knowledge, and everybody is equal on this board. No favorites, no favorites. Thank you.
Dave, you have to take nominations for vice president.
Okay, may I have, we're gonna have nominations for vice president. And with that said, I wanted to nominate William Feinstein. Are there any other nominations for vice president? Going once, going twice, going 3 times? Okay, Cheryl, I guess you would call the roll call now. Thank you, Dr. Belandi.
Okay. Maybe you're mute. Cheryl, you're mute.
Sorry. We are now going to do a roll call. There was a nomination by David Matthews for William Feinstein to be vice president. Ms. Banks Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Blumenthal,
Yes.
Mr. Montano,
Yes.
Dr. Mullings,
Yes.
Mr. Feinstein,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
No.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
It is a 6 yes vote, 1 no vote. Mr. Feinstein, you've been elected as vice president.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Bill. Would you like to say a
Thank
few
you.
words?
No, just that I plan to work just as hard as I have since joining the board, and will continue to do so in this role as well. So thank you all for your support.
Okay, that sounds great. Dr. Belandi, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, our first order of just a quick first order of business is to have the budget. We'll do like 2 separate issues in essence. First, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl in a minute to do a budget presentation. After the budget presentation, we'll take questions from the board and the members of the public if there are any. And then you need to vote on the budget. And then we'll go into the regular agenda. We'll go into the regular agenda, and then, Bubba got any questions on the regular agenda, and then you'll vote on the regular agenda. So we'll have 2 different votes, one on the regular budget, one on the agenda. Just by a quick, before Cheryl starts, I'll just go over 2 things that are important. There will be a recommendation to see if we would move our meetings to May 26th and June 30th, and have our regular meeting on the 19th be for the interviewing of a Board of Education member for the members of the public. The Mr. Trustee vacancy will be advertised on the website tomorrow, and it will be blasted on the website. There's a criteria for a school board member that will be there too. It's minimal criteria. The Board of Education will be asking that anybody who would like to apply to the board secretary. That we will ask that application to be in by the 13th, which is in 2 weeks. And then we will then give those applications to the Board of Education. The Board of Education will interview on the 19th. Those interviews will be held in public. The way it works is if we do it live, and that, well, we'll play that by ear over the next couple of weeks with increase in COVID or anything. If it's a live meeting, the candidates will be instructed to go to a room separate from the boardroom. They will be asked to go in the boardroom, have their interview, and then the next candidate will be brought back in the room, because you cannot have all the candidates in the room at the same time. It creates an unfair advantage for the last candidate, for the first candidate, and an advantage to the last couple of candidates. If it's in a Zoom meeting and we do have any COVID issues and the board chooses to do it Zoom, then you would then put the candidates in a holding area where the board secretary would be with them, and they would be instructed they could not use their phones. And basically they would come in and out of the board in areas, but come into the public meeting like we're doing now. They would come be ushered into the public meeting, and the board would interview them. After the interviews, the board goes into executive session and deliberates on who they feel is the next board member, and they come back out of executive session on the 19th, and they vote on just the board member. So the process is, that's the way the process goes, and that's what will be. So the board would have to vote on the 19th being Board of Education interviews. Later on, doesn't have to be right now. And also to have a regular board meeting on the 26th and a regular board meeting on the 30th, move the meeting that we had in June. That will give us more time to put things together. So if we have a new superintendent coming as of July 1 or very shortly after that, will give me enough time to get as much done as I can to help that candidate move to the next level. And that gives you that. We do have just the last thing I have, and then I'll turn it over to Cheryl for the budget presentation. We did have some increase in COVID numbers since the break. As of today, and I know for a fact we're in the process of quarantining as I speak. My phone has been texting back and forth with quarantining issues. But as of today, end of school day, since the break, which is almost 2 weeks now, we had 12 positive 12 positive student cases and 5 staff cases. We've quarantined approximately 153 students and 6 staff members as of today. And that's going to increase because, like I said, we're in the process of quarantining right now as we speak. And I assume it's going to increase a little bit in the next couple of days. I hope it will go down. I hope we're not seeing a influx. But I knew now we have a different normal. We are at a volunteer masking situation. Most students and staff are not wearing masks. So basically, when we don't wear masks, the infection rates go a little higher in the rooms and the quarantining rates go a little higher because prior to the volunteering of masking, if you were within 3 to 6 feet of someone with a mask on, we didn't quarantine you. Now, when there's no masks involved, we have to quarantine if you're within a 6-foot range. So that becomes a little more interesting for us, but there is an increase. We're working on it. And we're going to, and thanks Ms. Watson for her suggestion. We're going to, we'll ask our students to increase their testing if we can. We have testing available, and we'll be asking our students if they want to participate more. We'll get some information out tomorrow, and we'll continually do that over the next couple of weeks. So hopefully we'll get some more students tested. Right now, we're at 1 test a week. If we go on, there's some rumors about going into orange 2 tests and red 2 tests a week. That's got to be done by the health department. So if we do get into that orange and red zone, there's a very good possibility we have to test twice a week. We're not at that level yet. We're close, but we're not at that level yet. The only time masking would come back, and that's a recommendation, is when the district goes to red, and we're not at that level either. So I'll keep you apprised of this because, again, it does change things, and people have to know if masks come back or vaccinations or not vaccinations. I'm sorry, more testing is required. So that just gives you an update on that. Now I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl. She's going to go through the budget. And I think it's an extensive, but it's an excellent budget. It does a lot of things for students. Cheryl will explain that. It's a very student-oriented budget, and it's also a budget that has many of the things we talked about in it. It follows all of the things that we've done over the last 7 months. It also follows the plan that was the board approved at the August or September meeting. I forget which one, but it does follow the plan, and it goes into next year. And it also, Cheryl will explain this, it also starts to talk about subsequent years. What are you going to do to make sure that these intervention people that we have, that we were able to hire through ESSER funds, we get them into the budget because they're crucial for the academic rise in our school district. We can never forget that 80% of our students are not at grade level in math, and about 65 in language arts are not there. So you can never forget that. So, and you really got to be able to handle it with the budget we created and also future budgets. So I'll stop and I'll turn it over to Cheryl.
Thanks, Ron. Daichi, if you can please put up the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending our board meeting tonight, which is including our annual public budget hearing. This is the 2022, the 2023 budget. The budget process that the district uses is all the principals and department supervisors enter their budget items in our accounting software, Systems 3000. Then the superintendent and I review the budget and create the first draft. This year, state aid was released on March 10th. That is when we are notified of our state aid funding, as well as the amounts required to be budgeted for charter school tuition. The 2022-2023 preliminary budget, which includes a 2% tax increase, was approved by the board via resolution on March 17th, 2022. The proposed budget was submitted on March 21st to the Executive County Superintendent. And on April 12th, 2022, the county approved our preliminary budget. And tonight is our required public budget hearing, and there is a resolution on the agenda to adopt the budget. Next slide, please, Daichi. This slide shows where does our money come from? What are all of the revenues in the district? So our largest revenue is the general fund tax levy, and that's roughly $58.2 million. The next is, in the general fund, is state aid. There's a following slide that will go through each category of state aid we get, but that's roughly $10 million. We then receive tuition from our send receive agreement with Englewood Cliffs of roughly $700,000. Then we have rental income, semi-revenue, and some miscellaneous revenue of roughly $300,000. The 2022-23 budget is utilizing $2.7 million in fund balance as required in the audit. We are withdrawing $3 million from the capital reserve for capital projects. We have federal and state grant funding in the amount of roughly $2.2 million. And our debt service fund, which is funded by tax levy, is roughly $1.8 million. And this is a total budget of $89 million. Next slide, please, Daichi. Just some revenue highlights. The district is increasing the general fund tax levy 2%. One of the items that we had to deal with when creating this budget was our state aid revenue has decreased by $159,000. And the reason for the decrease in revenue is due to lower enrollment of our out of town students attending our academy program, which is funded by school choice aid. There is also a reduction in tuition revenue from Englewood Cliffs by $100,000 due to a lower enrollment of students. And again, the budget is using a one-time revenue of fund balance in the amount of $2.7 million. Next slide, please, Daichi. This slide shows you all of the categories of state aid that we receive. So there you see the school choice figure. That's for the out-of-town academy students. Actually has decreased $221,000. Transportation aid remained the same, and special education aid increased $61,000 roughly. Security aid, adjustment aid, and extraordinary aid is predicted also to be the same for an overall decrease of $159,484. The next slide will show you. Where does the money go? How have we allocated $89 million within this budget to be spent? Roughly $21.4 million is for regular education. This includes all regular education programs, teacher salaries, our instructional supplies, transportation for regular education, bilingual instruction, and our clubs and athletics, as well as out-of-district tuition for vocational programs. Special education represents $19.8 million, and this is for in-district programs, out-of-district tuition, related services per our IEPs, our child study team cost, and then special education transportation. We then have support services in roughly $6.5 million. This includes our attendance and social workers, our health services, which is our school nurses, our guidance departments, improvement of instruction for curriculum, our media centers, libraries, and technology staff, staff training district-wide, and then other transportation in the district. We then have administrative costs, which is roughly $5.6 million. This includes general administration, which is the superintendent's office, school administration, which is all of our principals and vice principals for next year, the business office and human resources department, and our director of technology and network engineer. We then have maintenance cost of roughly $5.5 million. This includes our custodial services, which the majority of that money represents our Pritchard contract, upkeep of grounds, our security guards, and that is the costs included in the maintenance as well as utilities. Employee benefits, which is roughly $8.1 million. This is medical, prescription, dental benefits, unemployment costs, and tuition reimbursement for all employees in the district. And that is the total current expenses. Then for our charter school and the preschool required transfer for special education students is $4.4 million. Again, our grant funds, federal and state, is $12.2 million. And debt service, which is principal and interest on bonds, is $1.8 million for a total budget of $89.1 million. Next slide, please, Daichi. So as I referenced capital outlay, out of the capital outlay fund, there is $3.3 million roughly of construction projects. And those are the expansion of the Dwight Morrow High School North Cafeteria. At Quarles Early Childhood Learning Center, there is a roof project. At Janice Dismas Middle School, there is a science lab renovation, as well as an HVAC project. And at Witten White Stadium, potential upgrades. There is also the SDA funding assessment, which is a number sent to us by the state of $184,772. Next slide, please, Daichi. Due to COVID, and as well as our schools not being open till April of 21, we have much, there's been an increase in our grant funding, whether it's the state or the federal grants. So the next few slides, I'm going to go through all of the different categories that make up state preschool aid, non-public funding, and the federal grants. So everyone has a good understanding of what are all the recurring grants, what are the COVID-related grants, when they expire, and what we have used them for, as well as the future planned uses for the grant monies at this time. If you can please go to the next slide, Daichi. So the next few slides are going to show you a comparison of this school year versus what we are predicting for next school year. And the first few grants are our recurring grants. These are ones most districts will receive if they qualify every single school year. So as you see, we start with Title I. Traditionally, the district has always received Title I funds. Over the last few years, we have always used them for our 4 instructional coaches, as well as after school and summer programs. One difference this year, because we had a large carryover due to the fact school did not open till April of 2021, is we have been able to charge 1.5 interventionist salaries to this grant. Title IIA, which is for professional development, we have used this year for consultants to provide professional development to our staff, as well as work on RTI programs. One of the items in this grant was to hire a bilingual coach. Unfortunately, that position is still vacant due to having the proper certifications. We are having a hard time filling the position. So as you can see, there's a carryover with the regular allotment of $150,000 for next year. And that is being allocated to hopefully hire a bilingual coach. Title III, again, we had a large carryover this school year it was up to $280,000. That is paid for our bilingual interventionist in the schools. Next year, it'll pay for a portion of their salary. IDEA, which is another recurring grant, is for special education. As you see, again, we had a very large carryover due to school not being open. And one thing we did this year to take advantage of that and to provide an interventionist is you can voluntarily opt to provide early intervening services for regular ed students. And we have done that. We also plan on doing it again next year. The other items charged to IDEA are tuition, related services, as well as any new busing that may come forward due to the increase in cost is also allowed. And we moved one route to that this year. Perkins funding, which is also a recurring grant, provides a small amount of funds to the district for our career and technical approved educational programs. And those are our 5 academies. The majority of the money is to purchase supplies and testing for the various programs we have. The next round of grants are all related to COVID. If it was not for COVID, no districts have ever received these before. The first one is IDEA ARP funds. These funds are set to expire this school year. Well, there may be a carryover for next year, but what we are using them for is to train and have teachers be certified in Orton Gillingham. It's a whole college program that our teachers would go through, and we're currently in the process of recruiting those teachers, as well as voluntarily using early intervening service money to help support interventionist salaries. The next part, ESSER 2, you see the $2.5 million. That is to help pay for the air conditioning projects that will take place this summer at Quarles, Dismas, and Dwight Morrow High School in the gymnasiums. The benefit of that is any monies that would have been used from capital reserve or the general budget can now go back to the reserve or be put back into the general fund budget and instead be paid for by a grant. And that's to address proper ventilation due to COVID. ESSER 2 Learning Acceleration. None of these monies have been spent to date, and we expect a complete carryover, and this would be used for after school and summer programming and also support other programs that help address learning loss during COVID-19 for students. Next slide, please, Daichi. ESSER 2 Mental Health. We had $45,000. It has all been spent this year, and this was to have the Bergen Family Center mental health services at Janice Dismas Middle School. There will be no carryover of those funds. ESSER 2 is set to expire June 30th, 2020. I'm sorry, September 30th, 2023. The next round of funding that we received this year was ESSER 3. ESSER 3, the first category of $5.8 million. We are anticipating spending $1.8 million of that this year, carrying over $4 million. And that is where interventionist salaries have been charged, as well as purchasing additional resources and supports for the classrooms and the RTI program. We are anticipating next year to again fund interventionists, provide supports, and now also pay for the computer insurance for the Apple computers, as well as hotspots for students, and fund the Bergen Family Center mental health contract at Janice Dismas Middle School. ESSER 3 Learning Coach, that's $303,000. None of those monies have been spent. They will be carried over into next school year. And that is anticipated to again provide more supports for the interventionists and RTI programs that we're running in all of the schools. ESSER 3 Summer and ESSER 3 Beyond the School Day, both of which are $40,000. Nothing has been spent. Again, will be carried over, and they're pretty self-explanatory. It's to be used to run a summer program, and it's to be used to run an after-school program. Daichi, the next slide, please. ESSER 3 Mental Health Funds of $88,501 has been spent this year, again to support the Bergen Family Center mental health services contract at the middle school, and there will be no carryover of that allotment. ESSER 3 funds are good until September 30th, 2024. So as you see, each grant, at each level of the funding expires 1 year after another. And that's going to be important as we go through the rest of the presentation. The very first round of money we received for COVID was CARES. We received $900,000. We got notified in March, April of 2020. Some of that money was for non-public schools, and some of it was for Englewood Public Schools. Out of the Englewood Public School portion, what we have spent that money on over the last 2 years, we spent it in 2021, and then 21-22 was to prepare your schools to open for COVID. We trained our teachers on Teams. We bought PPE supplies such as desk shields, air filtration systems, gloves, masks, sanitizing machines, and we also paid for the computer insurance, and we also paid for the hotspots with T-Mobile. And that's what the money's been used for the last 2 years. This year is the final year. And again, the same items were purchased. SDA Emergent and Capital Needs. This was released just a few months ago. It was on the board agenda for $66,000. This is also to support the air conditioning projects taking place this summer. An ARP homeless children grant of $37,100 also was just released a few months ago. And this is being used to pay for transportation costs for our homeless students, since we did have an increase due to COVID, as well as the flooding in Englewood during Storm Ida. Next slide, please, Daichi. Now this is the state funding. So preschool aid, everybody knows we do have preschool full day programs, grade age 3, as well as age 4. But the state has 3 different sections of what we must budget for preschool. One is called the preschool aid transfer. This number is determined by the state. We have to report the number of inclusion students in our general ed population, and then they allocate a per pupil cost that we must budget. Next, we have preschool aid carryover. And again, you can see a large amount due to school was not open until April of 21, and it's per our audit as well. And we must budget these funds to support the program. Then the preschool state aid line, this is the amount that comes off our state aid form that we received in March. And the good news is the state did give us another $66,000. And all of these monies are spent to support the preschool program. So this is our contract with Bergen Family Center. It's our own teachers in-house. It's all of the busing. Every child gets a bus. It's instructional supplies, health benefits of our teachers, as well as all the paraprofessionals we're required to have in the classrooms. Non-public state aid, these are funds that are not the districts. We are the flow through, and then we help the public schools order items, and they're in the categories of security, textbooks, nursing, special education compensatory services, and as well as speech. Next slide, please, Daichi. And the last fund we're budgeting is the debt service. So these are the bonds from the John Greco referendum. The interest for next year is $110,000. The principal is roughly $1.7 million. And in 23-24 will be the final payment of the debt. The bonds will be completely paid off after one more budget cycle. Next slide, please, Daichi. So the overall tax impact of the 2022-2023 budget is as follows. A home valued at $458,000 will see an increase of taxes of $138. A home value at $958,000 will see an increase of taxes of $289. And a home value of $1.5 million will see an increase of $453. Next slide, please, Daichi. So now that I've gone through the numbers, as Ron mentioned before, this really is a great budget. This budget directly aligns student need with financial resources. It continues the path we're on. There's an increase in instructional supplies and textbooks. This is the phase 1 of including interventionists into the general fund budget so we can sustain them in the district forever, hopefully. Even capital projects that are in this budget, 2 of them are to fit academic needs. One is the high school cafeteria expansion, and it's to reduce lunch periods so we can increase instructional learning opportunities at the high school. The Dismiss Middle School science labs are going to be renovated to match curriculum requirements. Next slide, please, Daichi. So again, this budget, the 2022-2023 budget, all decisions were made, all financial decisions were made with one concentrated single focus, and that was student academic achievement. As we've heard in the meetings, we know our students are not on grade level. We have a solutions-based approach that has been working, and we want to continue it. So we had to ask ourselves the questions of, how can the district continue to financially support successful solution-based approach RTI student model to address standardized test results that show only 20% of students are on grade level in math and only 25% of students are on grade level in language arts? How does the district continue to rebuild the bilingual ESL program to be back in compliance with state regulations and address the increase in the ESL population district-wide? Next slide, please, Daichi. Additionally, how can the district continue to provide direct student support services for mental health? What is the district's long-term financial plan to be able to afford interventionists being charged to grants that expire by September 2024? How does the district find funding when state aid has been reduced by $160,000 and charter school tuition has increased $200,000? So with all of these challenges, the phase one approach to address them is we have a reduction of 5 staff positions. We have also been able to reallocate some overhead cost of our preschool program based on the large carryover and an increase in state funding. We had to take a little bit of a reduction in textbook, technology, and supplies to be purchased in phase two of this plan, or if new grant funding comes available or funds in the general fund budget become available. But I want everyone to know, and please note that there are no reductions in instructional programs in this budget. No classrooms, no programs are reduced. There is only an increase in bilingual education programs for our students. So as we mentioned, some grants will be expiring a year apart from each other. We have some issues to deal with and try to continue funding. So once we finish this budget, we already have to keep thinking about how are we going to sustain this in year 2 and sustain it in year 3. So these are some future items that we need to consider. One is state funding. Englewood receives $535,000 of adjustment aid. This aid was created as a safety net for any district who was going to lose state aid based on the formula created under Governor Corzine. The state has been taking this money back in other districts. So far, we have lucked out and they have not, but we must be aware of that fact. The other thing the State Department of Education is currently doing is reviewing the current school funding formula. We have no details of what could be changed, but I want everyone to be aware that next year's budget, the 23-24 budget, could be prepared with a brand new school funding formula. One thing that the district now has reached is what is called spending at adequacy. What does that mean? Per the current state formula, the state determines what your adequacy budget should be. What that means is how much can your local taxpayer afford to support your general fund budget? We have now hit that adequacy level. So what that means for us is because of the new law under Chapter 44, which is a change in the state health benefits plan, if you are a district who is at adequacy or spending above, you are required to return to the taxpayer any savings on health benefits for your employees going into the EHP program. If that was applicable to Englewood preparing this budget, the 22-23, we would have had to reduce this budget by another $144,000. We will have to deal with this next year if we do have a savings from the EHP plan. Another item to consider that we will have to work on this year is our Apple computer lease. This is the last year, the 22-23 budget is the last year of payment for that lease. We will need to make a decision if we want to continue with Apple, or would we rather switch to another platform to have cost savings to provide funds to pay for interventionists working directly with students. Another item that we should all be aware of for this year is any savings that was not anticipated, such as retirements after the fact, lower health costs coming in for health benefits. We should be reserving those to implement phase 2 to start putting more interventionists into the general fund budget. We have to continue with the focus of investing in student achievement so students come back and we prevent students going to the charter school. Every year for the last 4 years, that number has gone up at least $200,000. So for every million we are raising the tax levy, 200,000 automatically is going to the charter school. We want to keep that here with our students. And the other item we should be looking at is we should try to create more in-district special education programs to prevent students going out, hopefully bring some students back, which would reduce our tuition and transportation costs for out-of-district placements. So those are all the slides, and I just want to close with, many of us have been here a long time. many of the staff members, many of the board members, and our community members. And we have really waited a long time to have a budget that bases academic and a financial plan together. And we finally have it. And we must continue to professionally work together and keep the positive momentum and morale to ensure that the Englewood students keep receiving the education they've always deserved. So thank you, and I'd like to open the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Cheryl. We're going to do it in a second. Great job.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure the year and a half that I've been here working with Cheryl. I mean, I think she said she hit it all, that this is a budget that really is very student-centered, has been built, and the process has taken this long. And I think Cheryl said the same thing I would say to you, and then we're going to open it up. It's got to continue. I mean, that last slide that Cheryl just put up, I think board members have to look at that next year and make determinations on the Apple lease, because if you look at an Apple lease of 800,000 and you look at maybe a Chromebook lease of similar product, does a similar job, take a look at it, because you can reduce it by half, and that's $400,000 you can take now and bring those interventionists back. Because right now we have 5 intervention salaries in ESSER funding and funding where they're going to have to be picked up. So it's important to look at that. So and our bilingual programs will increase. We have obviously an emerging Latino population that is now becoming the majority of the community now in our school district. So we need to take care of that population. So all of that's there. Without any cuts that we made did not affect the classroom instruction. Cheryl hit that right on the head. Yeah, do we have to downsize administration? Do we have to looking at some, class sizes and those kind of things? And we're not going to fill some of the positions when people retire to pick up that money, but it never affected the classroom. We have pretty strong class sizes in most cases. And I think this budget will bear that out. So again, excellent job that Cheryl did over the year and a half that I've been here, or over maybe a year, a little over a year. I don't know what it is anymore. I forget. But it's been, it's been something that's important, and I hope it continues. So basically that's what we are. We'll take any questions from, I know most board members already asked us questions and sent us questions, but Dave, it would be the board members first, and then it would be any members from the public who would like to ask questions about the budget only, and then we'll go into the agenda.
Okay, thank you. So Cheryl, we're gonna go by roll call to see if board members have any questions.
Sure. Ms. Banks Watson would be first.
First, I just want to thank you, Cheryl. That was an excellent presentation. And
Thank you.
pretty much we've already gone over the budget in detail, so I really don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you also for doing that.
You're welcome. Ms. Blumenthal?
No questions at this time. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Montano?
No questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Dr. Mullings?
No comment. Thank you. Very clear, concise delivery. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Feinstein?
I have no additional questions that I haven't already asked. Great budget. Thank you for all the hard work that you put into it. I know you had a shorter turnaround time to get it done, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
No questions, just a comment. It's an amazing presentation. It's the first time in my almost 4 years on the board that I've seen a budget that is so well put together and specifically geared towards student achievement and asking the questions and answering the questions that will benefit the kids. I'm just curious to see moving forward how this board will screw it up.
Well, my presentation's hoping that can't happen. That's what I was trying to do.
Well, the plan. Yes.
I'll keep it, don't worry, I'll keep it
Yes,
intact.
yes,
I'll keep
yes,
it intact.
okay.
Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, I just had a few quick questions. can you just define what extraordinary aid is?
Sure. Extraordinary aid is for special education students. There's different categories. So a public school student, the state will reimburse you for cost over a threshold of 45,000. For out-of-district students, if they're in public schools is another number. And if you have students placed out of district in a private school for the handicapped, it is another number. You don't get 100% back. It's tiered. It's based on how much money the state has that year. The numbers change all the time. The state's been very generous the last 2 years. There's years they reduce it though as well. So it's based on your special education population and for costs that qualify for tuition and related services.
Okay, and how has inflation affected this budget, if at all, or is it too early to tell? I mean, all you guys do is go to the gas station or go to the supermarket or try to buy a car, or interest rates to buy a home, and people are being squeezed.
Good question. Inflation itself, where we're really seeing an impact of our current economic climate is in transportation. Gas going up obviously isn't helpful, but we can't predict everything that will happen. But I have to say, based on our economic climate, some of our biggest struggles district-wide is finding employees and the back order of shipments of supplies. So it's not only money, it's also the availability of being able to hire staff, and as well as a very long delay in shipping times, especially for anything related to construction.
Okay, and I just want to know your experience. Our special ed budget is now very closely approaching our regular ed budget. Is that unusual for school districts to have that kind of almost same amount of money? Or can you generalize?
But I wouldn't compare us to other districts. What I can say is based upon, and my last slide does touch on that, is based on our increase in special education services and population, that we need to take a look at creating more in-house programs so that students do stay in district.
Of the special
Years, they're with their friends. There's also other benefits, not just money, to students staying in district. Some of them are on a bus for a long time. I had a busing issue just last night that I had to deal with till 7 o'clock. You'd rather keep your students in district for many reasons, not just money.
Is the overwhelming majority of money spent in special ed for out of district, for sending kids outside the district?
No, the overwhelming cost would be internal.
Oh, okay. Okay. And my last question is, what does SDA stand for? I get confused with all these acronyms.
School Development Authority.
And what do they do?
They're a division at the state that oversees construction, but they fund the construction. So when we did the John Greco referendum, we received SDA funding. So at that time, you would get 40% on capital projects, and you would get $143 per square foot for any new buildings or additional space you were building.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
That they're making you pay back basically an assessment because they gave you money.
So was it like a loan then that they gave us?
No, it was supposed to be grant funding, but I guess they needed money and put this assessment out after the fact.
You can't run a business in the real world like that. But anyway, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Dave, now you would open up to the public on questions about the budget only. Then
Okay.
we would vote on the budget right after that.
Okay. Any questions from the public? I guess Daichi would be able to see if someone has a question.
Yes,
On
Mr. Matthews, currently there's nobody with their hand raised.
Okay, so then we would move now to a vote, Dave.
Okay, so Cheryl, I guess you could do the roll call for the board members present, please.
Sure. Okay, we are voting on the 2022, 2023 budget. This is to adopt the budget. Ms. Banks Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Blumenthal,
Yes.
Mr. Montano,
Yes.
Dr. Mullings,
Yes.
Mr. Feinstein,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
The budget is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, board. The next thing, Dave, board members and board president, we have a presentation by the auditor, which is, then you would have the ability to ask any questions of the auditor. And then that's part of our agenda. And then we would go to agenda items only for discussion and then eventually voting on the agenda. So Cheryl, would you introduce the auditor to the board, please?
Sure. This evening, we also have Andrew Parenti from Lurch, Vinci and Higgins. They are your independent financial auditors who do your audit every year, and he will be presenting to you the annual financial report for June 30th, 2021 school year. Daichi, if you can please let Andrew into the meeting and be able to speak.
Yes, Cheryl. He's currently in the room. So,
Oh, there he is. Hi, Andrew.
Hey Cheryl, how you doing? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Once again, my name's Andrew Parenti. I'm with Lurch, Vinci and Higgins. We have completed your audit for the year ending June 30th, 2021. You all should have received 2 reports. The larger report would be your CAFR, that's your comprehensive annual financial report. And then the smaller report would be your auditor's management report. Included in the management report would be any findings and recommendations, if any. As far as the CAFR is concerned, it's primarily made up of 4 sections. The first section would be the introductory section, which is a narrative of the school district prepared by management. The second section would be the management discussion and analysis, which is the MD&A. That's basically your financial statements in a narrative form. The third section would be your financial section, which would include an auditor's opinion, financial statements, and footnotes to the financial statements. And then the last section would be a statistical section, which would include miscellaneous statistics of both the school district and the city. I had mentioned that as part of your financial statements, there's an auditor's opinion attached. The auditor's opinion for the year ended June 30th, 2021 is an unmodified opinion. What that means is that your financial statements are fairly stated and free of material misstatement. That's a clean opinion. That's the opinion you want to receive on an annual basis. I'd like to briefly discuss the district's fund balance at June 30th, 2021. The district had a very good year in 21. It started the year with 9.7 million in fund balance, and you ended with 15.6 million in fund balance. It's an increase of approximately $6 million. Okay. That fund balance is restricted for several different purposes, which I'll get into, some of which Cheryl had mentioned in her budget presentation. The first restricted fund balance would be excess surplus in the amount of 2.7 million. That is fund balance that Cheryl had to utilize when she prepared the 22-23 budget. The next reserve would be excess surplus in the amount of 1.5 million that was utilized in the 21-22 school year. That's the school year we're in right now. The district also established a capital reserve in the amount of 5.6 million. There is a maintenance reserve for 522,000. The district has established an emergency reserve for 702,000. And then the last major component of your fund balance would be your unassigned fund balance in the amount of 3.4 million. So again, the district ended with 15 million, and then that was just the different restrictions and uses of the fund balance that you'll have going forward. And then As far as recommendations are concerned, we had 3 recommendations. And let me just real quick before I get into the actual recommendations, there's 3 types of recommendations. There would be a material weakness, a significant deficiency, and then a general comment. General comment being the least severe of the 3. These 3 recommendations are all of the general comment nature. So the first recommendation we had was that the payroll agency deduction ledger balances be reviewed and reconciled with the monthly bank rec. The second recommendation is that the state comptroller be notified for contracts awarded in excess of 2.5 million. We had 1 contract awarded the ESS that the comptroller was not notified. And then the last recommendation dealt with student bodies activities, and that fundraising activities for the student groups be deposited into the student account rather than the athletic account. If the board has any questions, I'd be glad to address those at this point.
If any board member has a question, just raise your hand. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. I don't think we have any questions.
I think Ms.
I-
Watson.
Sherry.
Sherry had her hands up.
I did
Oh,
have,
okay.
I'm sorry. You mentioned 3 student bodies fund. Would you repeat a little bit about that?
Oh, the recommendation with regard to the student body?
Mhm.
There were fundraising activities that were run by the student groups, and those fundraising monies that were collected were deposited into the athletic account rather than the student body account.
Right.
It's in the bank. It was just in the wrong account.
I understand that. I was gonna ask if when students are raising money, right, they have their own separate accounts, right? How is it accounted for? Do the students give that money to teacher or someone who's in charge of it, and that's how it's deposited? Or so is there a policy, or so that wouldn't happen again? That's what I'm asking for you.
Andrew, I'll handle that. That's more strict management question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So how that works, Sherry, is you know how you have approved, well, you came on the board after, but we have club advisors as well as coaches for sports. And if any of those clubs decide to do a fundraiser, how it would work is that club advisor monitors the fundraising activities. So say there's going to be, a bake sale on Friday, and it's for the FBLA club. Whoever is that teacher who's been appointed as the advisor for FBLA would monitor that fundraiser. The students would be handing the money to that advisor. And then we have a student treasurer at the high school who then deposits that money into the account and records it in a ledger. And then that ledger would say the FBLA raised $100 from a bake sale. And then say they're going to go to the annual conference, they can use that $100 towards that annual conference.
Okay, so are they always monthly providing you with how much money they have in the account, just to ensure that
No, they don't. We don't do that. We have usually a very clean account. Last year, there wasn't even any recommendations. I think this happened because we were closed. And due to COVID, people wanted to just get the funds into the bank. As in previous years, the high school account is so clean and they have so much activity. Allison does a fabulous job with that account. And she does work with me though periodically and checks in with me for any questions she has.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members' questions from the auditor? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And unless you had anything else to say.
No, I just want to thank the board for giving the firm the opportunity to continue our relationship as your auditor. And again, thank you for letting us be your auditors.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna go back then. Dr. Belandi?
Just a point of order on the agenda. We do have minutes to approve in the board secretary's report. just whenever we want to put that in there. I just want to make sure we don't miss it.
Okay, can we do that now then?
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Banks Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Blumenthal,
Yes.
Mr. Montano,
Yes.
Dr. Mullings,
Yes.
Mr. Feinstein,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
The minutes are approved. We now need a motion for the Board Secretary Treasurer's Report of March 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Banks Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Blumenthal,
Yes.
Mr. Montano,
Yes.
Dr. Mullings,
Yes.
Mr. Feinstein,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
Approved. So technically on the agenda, the next item would be if there was any committee reports, Dave.
Are there any committee reports? And I know Human Resources met, but any other committee reports?
I'll give my report very quickly. The Human Resource Committee met April 26th. It was Dr. Cifuentes and myself. We discussed open positions. Currently, the district has 8 open positions that we're recruiting for, an additional 15 there are current vacancies, an additional 15 that we're recruiting for September 1 vacancies, for a total of 23 current openings. We discussed personnel items on the agenda today, including the 2 resolutions, which I'll talk about during the agenda discussion. And then finally, we discussed some plans for our May meeting, where we are planning to recognize the teachers of the year for each building, as well as the support staff of the year. And that was my report.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other reports? Okay, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Bellanti, I guess.
Cheryl's going through. Cheryl, up next is a public comment on the agenda, correct? Or what do we got left? Okay, right?
Addendums.
Cheryl, you come off mute.
Oh, sorry. Yes, it would be public comment on the consent agenda, but I also have 2 addendums to read.
Yeah, go ahead. Read the addendum, Cheryl. Go ahead, and then we'll take
Sure.
public comment, and then the board will vote on the regular agenda.
Okay. 22A65, approval of purchase services. Whereas the district requires specialized services to satisfy educational and business requirements, be it resolved, the Englewood Board of Education authorizes the president and secretary to enter into agreements with the listed individual or organization, subject to attorney review of any applicable agreement, both as to content and form. Vivian Instachio, it's an evaluation analysis for functional behavior from May through June 30th of 2022 for an estimated fee of $2,100. Next, we have a personnel addendum, 22P85, approval of 2122 contractual appointments and employment of personnel, full-time, part-time, certificated, non-certificated, and long-term substitutes. Danielle Lardieri, building-based substitute at Jatmas Dismas Middle School, $130 per diem from May 9th through June 30th, 2022. Approval of 2122 extra compensation positions. Lady Navarro, tutoring per the ATA guide at 75 hours from April 18th, 2022 through June 30th, 2022. Approval, 22P87, approval of 2223 renewal of lunch, recess, transportation aid, non-guide, Marjorie Green, district-wide at $14 per hour. for the 22-23 school year. Substitute teacher renewal, 22 P88, Danielle Lardieri, building-based substitute, district-wide, $130 per day for the 22-23 school year. Those are the addendums. We now have public comment on consent agenda only.
Okay, Daichi, are there any public comments?
Yes, Mr. Matthews, there's currently nobody with their hand up, raised.
Okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay. Are there any board members I would guess we would go to next with any comments?
On the agenda, correct, Dave?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just
Are you
just
going by
have
roll
one.
call?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you can do a
In
roll call
order
or
of the
just.
roll call.
Yeah, you
Ms.
can go to
Banks Watson,
Go ahead.
Ms. Banks Watson, any questions on the consent agenda and addendums?
Is she having some problems with the
Just ask.
connection?
I did have a question, Dr. Belandi, in regard to 22-F-117, so approval of vaping detection system. And I just wanted to know a little bit more about that, the Halo vaping detection system.
Okay, the vaping system is a system that many school districts use. And what it does is it creates vaping detection systems in the bathrooms. Most of the kids that we catch vaping are vaping in the bathroom. I had and it's interesting, I had a meeting with the students. I meet with the students. I try to meet with them once a month, the student government group. And a couple of months ago, they were telling me that there's a real problem in the bathrooms and vaping, and kids are uncomfortable going in the bathroom with the vaping. And obviously, vaping also has marijuana in it a lot of times. So we're dealing with that. So we decided a couple of months ago, we should do what other districts have done, put vape detectors in the bathroom. That's what we're doing in all our buildings. And these vape detectors are attached to the administrative cell phones. So when it goes off, it doesn't ring an alarm. When it goes off, it goes right to the administrators and said, okay, in bathroom A, you have vaping going on. So therefore the administrators can convene on the bathroom and hopefully catch the kids that are vaping in the bathroom. So they're pretty interesting. They look like little fire detectors. Many kids don't even know they're there to a certain degree. Obviously now that kids know we put them in, they'll be less apt to vape in the bathroom. And it is a detector, and it also helps us catch kids and help them through the process of educating them how bad vaping. We're not trying to punish them. We're just trying to say vaping is very bad and not good when you're smoking marijuana and vaping. A lot of the marijuana vaping comes from China, which is really very dangerous and very toxic. So that's what you see on the agenda, to do that in each bathroom.
Thank you. That I wanted a little bit more information as it related to. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you, anyone else have any questions?
Tamar's next. Ms. Blumenthal?
No questions.
Okay. Mr. Montano?
No questions, no comment.
Dr. Mullings?
Oh, no, thank you.
Mr. Feinstein?
Just a couple comments. I first wanted to publicly thank Sam Trustee. I know we're accepting his resignation for his service to the board and district, as well as his leadership as president for, I guess, about 14, 15 months, and wanted to wish him well in the future. I also wanted to just say thank you to the teachers. I know next week is National Teacher Appreciation Week. So just wanted to publicly thank them for all that they
Sorry,
do.
point of order. Is this any other business portion of the meeting?
This is on the agenda, Donovan.
Yeah, thanking teachers for next week. Yeah. Okay.
It's a resolution that's on the agenda. Thank you. And then lastly, I wanted to recognize the nurses. November 11th is where we have a resolution acknowledging May 11th as School Nurse Day. And I really just wanted to publicly name, I think they kind of are in the background a lot, and especially over the last 2 years, Miss Clapper at Quarles, Miss Norell at Greco, Miss Sadler at McLeod, Miss Lindano at Dismiss, and Miss Manchi at Dwight Morrow. And wanted to publicly thank them as part of this resolution that's on the agenda. So thank you.
Is there anyone else with a,
Mr.
Okay.
Rodriguez is next.
okay?
No comments, no questions.
And then Dave, Mr.
Yeah,
Matthews.
I also want to join Bill in thanking Sam for his service on the board and wishing him well, him and his family. And I just had one question, and that was, you mentioned someone in the addendum that was doing some tutoring. And I was just wondering, what are they tutoring?
Which-
It's on the agenda, Lady Navarro. It's the
Mhm.
cloud.
Yeah, I mean, what is
I
the
can answer it
subject?
if you'd like, Ron.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Just go ahead.
Because I needed to know, I had to ask to know what budget
Yeah,
code.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go
applied
ahead.
to it. There's a class in McLeod that has had substitutes throughout the year. And this is to tutor them in the morning to catch them up on, to make sure they're meeting the grade levels.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Dave, and I'd just like to add to the agenda items, and before you go to vote, goes to the public rather, we've had, our nurses and our support staff and our teachers all have had appreciation weeks over the last 3 weeks. Obviously, the nurses, I can't say enough about them. I mean, even tonight I was doing a little texting here because we got quarantining all over the place. I spent a lot of hours with them this year, at night, weekends, holidays. They've never not been there for me. I've been very actively involved, as you know, as the person handling the quarantining. And without them, I could not have done it. And they've been there every step of the way. So, same with the support staff. Support staff does a great job here. And that's all your support staff, custodians, maintenance, secretaries, aides, anybody that's on a support staff level has done a great job. That we appreciate them, and definitely appreciate the teaching staff and the whole staff in general, administrative too, who've done a great job the time I've been here. So I want to thank all those people, and a well-deserved board to appreciate them tonight on the agenda. So thank you. And now you can open it up to the public. Daichi, anything? On agenda
yeah,
items only?
there's
Okay.
currently nobody with their hand raised. Dr. Blondie.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Now we move to a vote.
Okay, Cheryl, I guess we do the roll call.
We need a motion for the agenda and the addendums, a motion to vote on them.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, now we're doing a roll call on all agenda and addendum items. Ms. Banks Watson,
Yes, approve.
Ms. Blumenthal,
Approved.
Mr. Montano,
Approved.
Dr. Mullings,
Yes.
Mr. Feinstein,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes.
All items pass.
Cheryl, next up.
Next up is public comment on any other items other than the consent agenda and addendum.
Okay, currently we don't have anybody with their hand raised.
Okay. So I
Then we
guess,
move to old and new business.
okay, I guess we go through roll call for that.
We
Sure.
just ask anybody to have any old or new business, Dave, that you want to concise the meetings. That's the best way to do it. Is there any,
Okay.
board member have any question, anything on old or new business?
Does any board member have anything on old and new business?
I had
You
one thing, if you don't mind. I was made aware that there was a teacher hired for a junior ROTC program that is currently hired, but I wasn't sure if the program was included. I didn't see anything about it, but I wasn't sure if there was going to be a way once we approved this level of the budget, but for the next, once we do the full budget after this, there was a way to include something about that in the budget. Is it possible like to start it for the fall or if there's already a teacher that was hired? I don't know if anybody knows if that like timeline would be feasible to start that program.
Are you asking, can junior ROTC be started in a school district?
Yeah, like do we have the budget available to do whatever would need to be done at that point for the
Yeah,
fall?
If you do a full-blown junior ROTC program, it's usually done by one branch of the service. So it's either done by Air Force, it's not, you know, and so on and so forth. You have to actively get involved with it. You have to solicit one of those branches of service and ask them if they have if they want to partner with you. Because the way ROTC works is, I'll use Air Force, for example. I'm very familiar with Air Force. You contact the Air Force. We'd like to start a junior ROTC program in our district. They will tell you if they would fund it with you. It used to be 50-50. I haven't done it in a long time, so I don't know the percentages up to date. And then what happens is they provide you with a retired Air Force officer, and usually two, and they run a full-blown program in your high school. It's coursework. It has to be scheduled. It takes a good year to do that. So if the board is inclined to look at that, then that's a discussion that if this board says to me, we want to look at it, I think we'd have to bring that to your attention, to the next superintendent early, that somebody comes in maybe in the summer or early fall and gives you an idea of what that program requires, what's required of the students, what's required of the staff. It's a very extensive program. It's not something you just do overnight.
What was the person that was hired already to run this program then?
Cheryl, can you jump in on that one?
Sure. A couple of years ago, this was brought up and there
Yeah.
was a presentation to the board, but we never hired a teacher to do it.
I don't know. Yeah.
It never went anywhere. But there was a presentation made to the board at one point. I know someone, a community member, who has some involvement with this, and they came and did a presentation with some people from some division of the Army or something.
Yeah, it's Army. Give me anyone. You got it all depends
Yeah.
which one's willing to go do
But
it.
we never started the program.
Oh, okay, so just something to bring up if we're interested with the new superintendent.
Yeah,
Thank
you got to get the full board. 5 of you would
Yeah.
have to direct the superintendent to do that, because now you got to get involved with those branches of service and solicit if they're willing to come in and work with you.
Okay, understood. Just something to explore. Okay, thank you.
Donovan?
Thanks, Dave. And with regard to that, Tamar, I think one of the reasons why the board hasn't considered having a program is because of the costs involved. There's a tremendous amount of, we have to contribute, the district will have to contribute a major portion of the cost for the program to run. So.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other,
Do you want me to do roll call, Dave?
or whoever wants?
Oh, you were doing it this way. That's right.
Yeah, whoever has something old or new business, just raise your hand. Okay, with that said, I just have one item for old and new business, and that is, I'd just like for us to move forward with putting up the sign at the high school. We've had the sign, it's been paid for. I don't know what, I guess rather than look backwards, let's look forward. And I just think we finally need to move this forward and get it done. Every other high school around us has a sign outside their high school, and it's very useful, I think, because you just spend a minute and you can find out what's going on there, and it may be something that some community member might want to contribute to or has some special skills. So again, it's been paid for, the wiring has been done, so I just like to move forward and just install it.
Cheryl, could you just a quick update on, just so we all know what that means? I mean, Dave's asking to get, is there anything the board has to do to move that forward? Is there anything missing that we have to do?
So at the current time, the sign has been delivered. It's with the installer. The electric line for the original placement of the sign has been completed for a while. All of our permits are issued. What did happen is there was the board wanted me, myself and Mike Hunkin to review if we could move the sign to the corner. I have sent you that information that PSE&G would have to install they have to install the electric for it. Then we need an electrician to run to what PSE&G puts in. We would have to apply for new permits. So at this point, if the wish is to just install it in the original place it was going to be, electric line is run, the sign is here. I just have to call the company and get it installed. If we wish to move the sign, then I have to go through the permit process, get PSE&G, and we will have to have another electric line run by an electrician.
So I guess what I'm saying is, we had a, well, go ahead, Donovan, and then Eric. You're muted, Donovan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, David. Shirley, please, if you could go over the budget for this new sign, because I understand that the previous sign funds were based on donations from the community, including the community chest, I think. So what is the budget to rebuild the sign? And how much did the district spend, and whether or not that was approved by the board? And what would be the budget to put the sign in a new location now?
So the sign that has been approved by the board, yes, there was 3 funding sources. I believe over the last 10 years, if not more, students actually first raised money to buy this sign, and the PTO is holding it. So part of the funding came from students raising money via the PTO. Then the community chest did also donate money. And then the budget provided the balance, which was roughly like $10,000, $12,000. And that was basically to pay for the electric line. And then the 2 donations paid for the sign. The same sign could be used if we moved the sign. The only additional cost we would have is running a new electrical line, which would be an electrician.
Sorry, but Cheryl, my understanding was that the sign was one-sided, but the board wanted 2 sides to be on.
It is 2-sided. The sign.
Okay, so additional funds monies were
No,
raised.
the original
to pay?
sign that was ordered was 2-sided.
But that's not what you told us.
Yes, correct. As you know, the original quotes that went out were not done by me. So what got sent was based on that, but it is a 2-sided sign.
So, okay, I'm done.
Eric?
So for the sake of expediting the process, right? What has to happen for us to take back our previous voting to move it? Instead, and go back to its original location just so that it can get done.
Well, the only motion that was on the floor was for me to provide to you information if it was possible to move the sign, what would that take? What would be the steps to do so? And if it was a 2-sided sign.
Right. But I also
So
think
now you have that information. So at this point, do we want to put it in its original spot? Or do we want to move it to the corner? Because now if we are to move the sign, I have to go back through the permit process, and PSE has to install something, which there is no cost with PSE&G, but then we do have to hire an electrician to run to that new box PSE&G would be installing.
Right, and so given the constraints of supply and availability and all these things, I don't think it's we have to reconsider and put it back, leave it as it was originally, as you guys had
Okay.
decided in the past. What do we have to put a motion out? What do we have to do?
Scott, would you have an opinion on that?
Cheryl, but the board was presented with misinformation and we voted based on incorrect information. You told the board that the sign was one-sided, and that was the basis for us to make a motion to change the sign to two sides.
That wasn't the only basis. The other basis was a student was hit by a car and the original
That
place,
has nothing to do with where the sign is placed.
it's in the minutes, Donovan.
Right?
Donovan,
I
it's
know,
in the
but
minutes.
yes, but those were speculations, are not based on any evidence or fact. The sign wasn't
That
there
kid was
and the
hit in
sign did
front of
not
us.
cause an accident.
Yeah.
Well, that was the feeling of the
excuse me.
majority of the board
Okay,
that
excuse me.
night, that the placement of the sign in the front would be a distraction while kids were leaving the high school.
That was just one board member's opinion.
No,
Okay,
the
Donovan,
majority of the
excuse me,
consensus
Donovan.
voted.
Moving on from there. What has to happen so we can then have it installed where it was originally proposed, and we can move on and have it done?
Make a motion to change the placement of the sign back to the original thing. If the majority of the board present votes to do it, it stays in, it goes back. That's as simple as it
Right,
is.
so I,
No
okay,
need-
so
no
I-
need- you don't need
Or
a
we
legal
could just
opinion
make a
on it.
motion to reverse the last motion to change the position of the sign, because there was a motion to put the sign where it was being built to put, except that we thought we got additional information that the sign was one-sided, but now I'm hearing that the sign is two sides. So what we should do is make a motion to reverse that last motion, which was made in error based on misinformation that we received from the administration.
That's all you have to do. Make a motion.
Eric, you want to make a motion?
yeah, I'm gonna make a motion to reverse our second motion on the sign and return it to its original proposal.
I second it.
Okay, you got a second. Okay. Now you'd have discussion, Dave, and then Cheryl will run the vote.
Yeah, I just want to say real quickly that we got to get this done. We've been going with this. The community chest has donated thousands of dollars. The students raised money, and it's just been sitting there. We should just get this done. And the wiring has already been done. The sign is collecting dust somewhere that's been paid for. So I just hope that we can get a majority vote to just move forward and put this to rest for good.
So Dave, could the vote be either vote to move the sign and undo it, or could we vote to just put the sign up where it is now, where it could be placed now? Like, could that
Can I
be an
make a
option?
suggestion? Can the motion be, one of you have to motion it, that you motion to put the sign in the front of the high school as per the original plan?
That's
I
what-
think that's what Eric
What he
did.
just did. That's
Simple?
it. You're
Yes,
done.
that's
Yeah,
what he just
that's the
did.
motion. Yeah,
We're making
Okay.
it way too complex.
Yeah, that's the motion. That's what you're voting
Okay,
on.
I second the motion.
Okay. then.
Okay. Cheryl, you want to do a roll call?
Sure. Ms. Ms. Banks Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Blumenthal,
Yes.
Mr. Montano,
Yes.
Dr. Mullings,
No.
Mr. Feinstein,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. the
Motion
sign
passes.
Original location, and Cheryl will start it ASAP. Okay.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
I guess all those in favor say aye or nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hey, 8:34.
You're great.
Yay.
Aye.
Excellent job.
Good night.
Okay, have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Guys.
Thank everyone.